Chapter now.
Are you going to ask for consent for the speakers?
Yeah.
So, I don't get this, but I don't want my name to appear next to the video.
Yeah, there are no names.
Yeah, I think you'll just be listed as your team. Yes. Hello. Right, I'll go through and ask the teams for give you orders and third pronouns if they have any. Opening bell.
Nicole speaking first, she exclusively, please.
Ryan, speaking second, please.
Opening opposition.
Michał speaking first, Paula second.
Closing government.
Speaking first, Elena. Speaking second, Flo.
Closing opposition.
And Nicole is speaking first. One is speaking second.
Righto. Everyone knows the motion. One of you two time, please. Will that make the all right. I'll see you tomorrow. Never get this. Cool. That will be the team. I would now like to welcome the Prime Minister to open the case outside the House.
Good. Okay. Okay. Our case today is that because of the specific incentives of the largest dominant organised religions, it is in their interest to pursue these types of actions outlined in the motion. This is considering their current trajectory and their place in both developed and developing countries today. What we're going to talk about, firstly, I'll give a little bit of framing, then secondly, framing on like characterising these religions and what their incentives are and what their trajectory is in these types of countries, and then I'm going to talk about how this policy will affect their followers in both the developed world or the developing world itself. First, in terms of framing, in terms of a model, we just think it's pretty straightforward as what was outlined in the info slide. It looks like the church dropping opposition to things like abortion, or the church not actively promoting against these types of progressive things such as like abortion or access to contraceptives, and it means kind of like saying that in church sermons or church documents or whatever the religion might be, or whatever, how it disperses information. Firstly, in terms of characterizing these religions, note that these sort of like dominant organized religions most often look like types of religions like the Catholic Church or mainstream. Clarification?
The motion is to declare more progressive interpretations. It's not you just not attacking this kind of policies. You actively interpret and base that on your side of the house as the dominant religion.
Yep, we think that's the same thing. It's basically saying that, Jesus says it's fine if you want to have an abortion. That's like pretty much the same thing, and it ends up in the same end goals as the model that we've just put out, as in dropping church opposition to abortion. We think that's pretty much the same thing. Okay, so let's talk about characterizing these specific religions. We think that, so they look like things like the Catholic Church or mainstream Protestant churches, such as Presbyterian in the US, looks like Buddhism, or it looks like any sort of large religion that exists. Note that like the incentives that they have is not just to get more people in the door, or not just to have more people attending their church services. We think that it's not only that. Obviously they do want to have an active following, but what they actually want is to have a good reputation and a good perception throughout society, because that good perception matters to them in terms of it means that more people will be like less opposed to allowing church church favourable policies to be passed in their local area, allowing more parish parish buildings to be built, or allowing more religious teaching in school. We think that it's that perception that these organised religions care about the most, not just feet in the door, although obviously they do care about that as well. They care about their reputation and their influence much more than that. So note that the way that these organised religions and their trajectory that is happening across both the developed and the developing world. Note that in the developing world, or the developed world, you normally see people swaying away from religion and becoming more irreligious as time goes on. We think that this happens for a number of reasons. Firstly, because people tend to just be more educated and have different values in terms of their values are more based on career and job prospects, and that's what they're told they should value in life. They should value spending their time cultivating a career or cultivating a life goal or a family. We think that that is why they tend to focus on those things a lot more, but also just in terms of the idea of cultural globalization, so that when one country becomes more Western and more irreligious, we think that because say those countries tend to be predominantly English speaking, so then at the point, or English or Spanish speaking, we think that those countries are then likely to pass on that same media to other countries through globalization around the world. So for example, all of the other sort of developing countries, a lot of them either speak French or Spanish or English as their second language. They're more likely to consume that type of media that exists in those dominant English, Spanish and French countries, and we think that that's how that globalization happens, and that's how that spread specifically happens. But note then also that in the developing world they tend to be more religious and more devout. I'll get onto that a little bit later about how it affects them specifically. So first, I already took one. First, let's talk about people in the developed world and how they're going to react to this type of motion, how their perception changes for the benefit of these large organised religions. So note that we're not going to change people who are irreligious in the status quo to being super religious now. Not everyone's going to become a massive theist and go to the church. We don't think that that's going to happen under either side of this motion, if because people don't just change their entire religious affiliations overnight. But what we do think is that at the point at which people see their the religion in their area acting more like they act, acting more like their society around them acts, in terms of I'm my society is pretty liberal, and now that religion is also acting in that specific liberal way. What that changes is the internal perception that those people have of their Catholic Church, or not the Catholic Church, but of that dominant religion in their specific area. What does that mean, and why does that matter, and why does that perception matter for those organised religions? Firstly, it reduces things like the power of the call for taxes on organised religions, because people don't see religions as being such a really, really harmful thing that will always oppose and will always be incredibly old-fashioned and fuddy-duddy and completely antithetical to progressive views. We see people are less likely to put forward calls for hospitals or schools to be under church controls. People are more likely to take away those sort of calls at the point at which people say, because people often don't want to go to a church-run or a church-run hospital or a church-run school, because they're they're going to teach my kids that abortion is wrong, or they're going to teach my kids that gay marriage is wrong, and I don't want to necessarily put people in that school. I don't want one of those types of schools in my areas, or something like that. We think people are more likely to say, hey, look, they're actively saying things that gay marriage is fine. So we think, no, I already took one earlier. So basically, we just think that that's pretty important, and we think that that perception matters a lot in terms of political, what's the word? Political, I don't know, dislike, I suppose. But then the third impact is just other things, even just things reducing the calls for less religious education in school. Even though religious education is often quite non-denominational in schools as a whole, we think that people often don't see it that way, because they still see it as being highly linked to this religious organisation that they see as being old-fashioned, as being conservative, as being something behind them. That links all the way back to those incentives of these dominant religions that I told you in the first place, in terms of perception, influence, and power, in terms of getting those more parish centres built in their area, getting more policies passed easier in their local constituencies, or even on a wider scale. Note, in the developing world, we see that as I already characterized, these people are generally more devout in terms of religion, and this is religion is more important for them when they have things less money, mostly for two specific reasons. Firstly, because they're more likely to want to see the value in the world around them beyond just like material value, and people like to be able to have the safety net of knowing, of having a religion to follow. But secondly, because of the sense of community that religion gives. We think that the church in those countries is likely to stay in power even as those countries progress from developing to developed countries, because of the fact that like as the church moves along with their progressive views, then those people will move along with it as well. Thank you, and I beg you to propose.
Okay, I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for her fine speech, and now let's welcome the leader of all.
Okay, so by simply changing your perception by a larger group also of the society, you not instantly like give this group a reason to actively work on your side, to actively propose changes in your favor. You just like giving her that group a better perception of yourself. But if this group in status quo doesn't care about you, this changing of perception doesn't really like makes this specific group to actively propose changes in your favor, because like firstly, this group in the status quo is not likely even to care about things you are proposing. So okay, like this group will probably hear, okay, you are proposing something that we actually a little bit like support, but you are still like oppressive group of the society. Like we are not letting to incorporate stuff into a state. So like still we don't have in your world and like an active mechanism to give like a, I don't know, leftist or a centrist parties in a like a liberal world to have like a large reason to propose changes in favors of churches, religions, etc. And even if you're basically addressing your whole argumentation to one churches like Christian churches, which are not like the major case, like of course like there are big case in this debate, like, but not all, like there are still like Muslim churches, etc. So like give us a reason why this Western society will have a reason to actively incorporate in their education in their stuff things in support of Muslim law, of Muslim culture, etc., etc. Because like Western societies will still have the whole backlash to that, and like there's no mechanism that they will support such stuff. Okay, like let's go to the major stuff in this debate. Firstly, like actively declaring those progressive ideas, it's not that simply stating, okay, like now we are like abortion, etc. This is actively supporting stuff like homosexual marriages, like this, of course, this abortion, like fighting with celibacy, etc. And it is like incorporating this gay stuff during like mosques, like and like even religious events, etc. And like teaching like your base that like these people are simply good, or celibacy is bad. Like things we are teaching in the past are actually bad, and like we don't want that because of this certain reasons which will probably be perceived by this larger group as like being dominated by a liberal media or etc. Okay. Okay, like there are two major groups in this debate, and let's see which are basically like in the interest of this dominant religions. Okay, what is the interest of those dominant religions? So like okay, on the other hand, it's like better perception by like a majority of the society. Like this is basically what they are proposing, and this is basically like a bigger base of people who like thinks, okay, like this religion is okay. But on the other hand, we have like smaller group of people who are actively engaged in teaching of your society, are actively in your society, are basically paying for your life, are paying for those churches, are paying for those religions, for the people in that, are actively creating the events that are happening in this religion. are basically creating the whole society, which actually makes this this church to exist, because like people on their side who are just simply caring about those religions are not actively participating in those events, in those religious things, etc. So this is basically why that smaller group on our side is more important in this debate, because this is the group which is actually creating the society. This is the group which is actually making this society possible to exist, because this is the group that is paying. This is the group that actually is the core that is visible. Okay. Okay. So let's see in the long term why we are creating harm to this smaller group. Okay. Okay. So there are two major characteristics of this group. We are like making this group likely to actually like make a harm in their world. Okay. So firstly, this group is caring about these core things that are existing in those religions. Like, for example, like gay marriages are bad, and like abortion is really bad, and everything is like a sin or haram, and you are basically going to hell after doing that things. Firstly, because they were taught in the past that by obeying to these rules, they are likely to have a benefits in afterlife, and to like go to a heaven and to have better life in afterlife. And this is the first thing. So by obeying to those rules, they will have these benefits. Secondly, because by their family and by this society, by their church, they were taught this specific tradition. So now because of the time, with time, this also like incorporated their own tradition, their own beliefs. Like they are actively addressing to these beliefs, and they think that they are their own, and they like want to protect them and vote for these parties, etc. And like, and the other thing, because by addressing to these beliefs, they think that they are existing in this society, and they are having benefits for simply existing in this society by participating in these events, etc., etc. Okay, and this group have a large confirmation bias connected to like conservative beliefs. When they see like as something that is as a possible danger to their belief, they are likely to accept that as something dangerous, and like to immediately opt out from this stuff, and to perceive this as dangerous. And firstly, so if you are creating and incorporating stuff that was dangerous to them, there are like three things that this group is likely to actually do. So like firstly, this group can opt out from this church, and like to go to like more conservative, smaller church. So you lose your base, you lose money. And secondly, they are likely to protest and attack possible like press, etc., etc. So you will have a chaos in your church. And like thirdly, they are like to protest, create in the counter media, counter narration. Thanks.
Okay, I'd like to thank the leader of for a fine speech now.
Thank you for the floor. Honourable panel, esteemed viewers on YouTube, 3 parts to this speech. Firstly, I'm going to tell you what our burden was in this debate and how we have already won the top half clash. Secondly, responding to the one argument we get from opening opposition. Thirdly, rebuilding our case, explaining why it wins, both in the context of the developed world, which seems to be what they are primarily interested in, and explaining why we win across the world in general. But on the first thing, panel, I think the team which best tells you how we best empower churches in the long run wins. It's true both in terms of literal power in states and societies, and also in terms of how much money they have, which is both beneficial to power and also beneficial in and of itself. No, power is valuable to these churches because they're self-interested actors. Oftentimes they care about preserving their own reputation, even if it means doing things which are wrong. CF, Catholic, handling of the paedophilia scandal. But oftentimes members of these churches care about fulfilling the mission which they believe to be a deep part, a profound part of the religious experience for them. This looks like missionary work and the capacity to engage in charitable enterprises. Both of these things are the explicit interests of these church organizations, and I'm going to tell you why we explicitly get them. Before I go on to building our case, what do we hear from opening opposition? I think firstly, we get a pushback on our case. They say, well, it's absurd that these centrist parties will now be implementing the crazy policies that you're talking about. Well, I think if you look at the actual policies we're describing, oftentimes this doesn't look like passing a specific policy. Rather, it looks like revoking existing privileges which churches historically had due to their pre-existing status in society. This is obviously true in the developing world, in which that place is clearly embedded and very powerful, but it's also true in the West. Although it is eroding in many places, there are still many hospitals and schools in Ireland, for example, which are explicitly ran by the Catholic Church. In parts of England and Spain, there are explicit calls to start taxing the church, revoking a long-held privilege. The church ought not be taxed because they believe it is a wealthy organization that is not paying its fair share in society. Therefore, it's not a radical thing, but rather the centrist, centre-right and centre-left parties simply maintaining the status quo, which is, in many cases, panel, a more reasonable action than the radical stuff that I think they seem to be suggesting that we were doing. But rather, panel, what is the one substantive argument they give, which is to say that, what matters the most is how individual churchgoers feel because they themselves are deeply conservative for assertive reasons, and therefore they will no longer believe in religion if you do this. I would note this is an extremely glib conception of what it means to be a religious person, that I am, by virtue of being a conservative who hates abortion and homosexuals marrying, a religious person. I am likely a Catholic person because I do believe that Jesus Christ was God incarnate, that I do have a profound amount of religious experience by singing hymns amongst people in my parish, and this is such an important part of my life that I dedicate a full day or a few hours of every week to doing something which is not productive in any way or doesn't benefit me in any way other than this. I would say that it is perhaps true that they do have these political beliefs, but oftentimes the religious part is so much more important, especially in the West, which is the place that they seem to care about the most, in which so few people still go to church. But two other things, one big other thing on this panel, I would note that church doctrine is historically in flux, right? I would also, firstly, that it is just, I'm not unclear as to why this is the end point of church doctrine that we have reached. I mean, the Vatican II was 40 or 50 years ago? It's not like the things which the church believes in are always going to stay the same. I mean, they were saying Mass in Latin not too long ago, but it's also true that there are just really good theological justifications for many of these positions. For example, Aquinas is the main philosophical figure that underpins Vatican II. He, for example, believed that life began at the point of birth, in direct contrast to the church's established belief on the subject of abortion. Insofar as there are these theologically robust justifications for these positions, I'm unclear as to why people would not then believe the church when they tell them a different thing, because obviously these people, under their conception of this, only believe that things are wrong insofar as the religious organizations told them they were wrong in the first place. If they then say something else and they give a good justification for that, I'm unclear as to why these church people are likely to give up this profound religious experience just because they are conservative. I do think politics, for most people, is a lot more incidental to their sense of identity and personhood than their explicit religion. But on our case panel, what was it and why was it so good? We told you a few things. Firstly, the stuff I was saying earlier about incentives and power. Secondly, what this sort of dogma looks like. We told you about, panel, firstly, the developed world, in which it is the case that people, by virtue of a product of Western culture and like, you know, the philosophical like position of individualism, how that interacts with university education and people making lots of money, and that tends to make people care less about religion and care more about spending lots of time working hard and stuff, how that is something which leads to people becoming more irreligious, and combined with negative perceptions of the church by virtue of most people in the West being comparatively more liberal than the stance of, for example, the Catholic Church on much of these positions, calling for things like the implementation of church taxes, calling for the revocation of churches managing schools, and indeed calling for religious education in all its forms to be dropped from teaching in public schools. We think that churches care profoundly about all of these things, and as far as we can preserve them by changing the perceptions of these organizations specifically, you do reduce support for these radical moves. But perhaps more profoundly, panel, we told you about the developing world, which is, I'll talk about the developing world after I take a point of information. Go for it.
It's obvious that if you lose your values, you're going to address a larger audience. That's like an certain. But why would you lose your values? What is remaining from your religion if you lose all your traditional values?
Okay, I just told you all these things about religious experience people get so much satisfaction in their life from. Things like community, things like relating to, you know, like people in the spirit. I did a whole thing on this earlier. But even if that weren't true, I don't think like being religious is about like opposing abortion. That is not like what it means to be religious, and like people's values change and stuff. I'm not sure, maybe that's your extension, go for it. But on the developing world panel, we told you a few things. First is that people will probably stay religious. This is important because we think this largely takes place in places like Latin America and Africa, in which dominant Western religions play large parts of people's lives, and they also tend to speak English, French, or Spanish. They will continue to be religious because of the sense of community it gives in places in which people are economically deprived. But as these economies develop, and is the case that they continue to interact with Western media and cultural influences without the churches adopting these positions, their positions in the developing world would continue to erode along the exact same trajectory as it has in the West. Note, panel, that in many parts of the developing world, they have even stronger like attachments to local institutions like hospitals and schools in places where the state cannot even provide these under status quo. You literally remove these to an even greater extent than you would in the West by virtue of not doing this in the long run. For these reasons, panel, we guarantee the safety, security, and prosperity of the church. Could not be prouder to stand on proposition.
Okay, thank you for that speech, and now to welcome Deputy.
OG stands up and said that now we have a sway that people resign from the religion because they are well educated or like a race of the atheism. But it's a one religion which is still rising and which still is the dominant religion compared to the Christianity, which start to make that kind of progressive policy, which start to make this way to be more liberal, which lose a lot of base and create a lot of backlash in their organization. We think that the reason why Islam is so powerful and like how they're based, because they have like a very active and engaged members which believe in the whole written history, the traditional core values, and they declare their life, their small communities, their families to make like the only one superior in their life. I will compare to you, first of all, the people who are already actively engaged, what kind of benefits they bring to the organization and to the religious community, to the people who can potentially join, and why they will be not able to fully engage to compare to the benefits for these people. But first of all, I will engage with the strongest point from opening government. So first of all, opening government want to talk about developing world and make a big case. I think that if you make the analysis which apply to both developed and developing world, it's a much more stronger than framing the debate like this, especially because in developing world, in a small communities, on a small villages, you have a much more conservative people. They are less exposed for this liberal bubble. They are less exposed for media. And also, do you know what is the most dangerous thing for these deeply believers, for the people who are conservative? The exposure for the LGBT movement, the risk that your children or your family will go into this particular way. If you actively declare as a member of the community and you open your door for all these people, you will be afraid of the risk which you can face based on that. But also he thinks that in terms of fulfilling mission, you based on written history, on evidence, on certain role models, on the people which you believe. these people who are conservatives and these people who like give you authority on their life, if they change their political views because of this, if they change how they create their families, how they perceive their life, they are the core of the people who gave you the trust. You couldn't prioritize the potential new people, but you need to keep the people who gave you the most money, who gave you the most legitimacy, because they are also some kind of prominent people in the local communities, because you have like some stages of being prominent. And if the people who sitting like in the same bench in a church, that's sitting like the gay couple and keeping there by their hands, they will be extremely angry. This is not something that these people existing on the street. These people come to your house, these people come to your community and try to steal your values, and probably their next demand will be even higher and more progressive. If you make that kind of step forward, you risk that these people will be afraid about the next steps and what will be happen on that. Also, I think most of the analysis from opening government based on the Christianity. So we also we engage in this and show you why taking them at their best when they achieve these potential new believers, the anger which raised in a church will be massive. But before that, 3 more points to PM speech. First of all, about changing the perception. What kind of tangible benefits you have if people change perception about the church? This is not like the people who will be looking on a church like more nicely or something, will start paying more taxes or will be more open for your policies. These people usually will be more neutral even if you have like the better PR. But for you as dominant religious organization, I don't see how that's helped for you, taking you at your best. Second of all, in terms of taxes, people know that they couldn't cut religion completely from their life, so they're accepting some kind of religious power in certain countries, but they are not likely to increase that only because like someone tried to be nice, especially like the people who can make the change and who can make powerful decisions. So now let's compare the most important clash in this debate in terms of how big is the group and how important is the group for the religious dominant organization. So people who are actively engaged, what these people do? They work together, they meeting in the community, they actively, for like the years and the years coming to you. They give you funding, they create in the society, they help you to create like new believers, they help you in your local small village and everything. And now they give you a lot of trust. They give you some special authority, which they follow your steps, and they believe that you are the most important, probably, creature which is in the society. You are higher for them than the states. And now you change your point of view, and you tell to these people that you change your mind because you need to appeal to the new people, because you need your base. Which means that you send the message that you are not my priority, but I want just more people. I don't care if they will be that engaged, because it's really less probable for the new group of people that they actively engage. Why is it less probable that the potential new believers will engage? Every time persons from LGBT community will be prioritized LGBTQ movement. Every woman, even if you legalize abortion, will have different superiority, especially because they are like in the certain stage of their life, they joining to potentially religion, they joining to some community, which means that they are not based their life on this, they are not super engaged, they have different priorities, they have like a different people or also different narratives which can influence them. So I think that even if you feel like a more friendly in the church or something, even if you come there, that doesn't change nothing for the church, but change for the people who are already there, who are like who are in a conservative base. I don't think that it's very good for like LGBT people or something, but the debate is in the interest of the religious organization. I will take opening.
Cool. So we admitted that like previous non-believers are not going to become instantly devout now or go to loads of church services. But even if their views are just neutralized, you not think that perception change is better than status quo when they're actively going against church policies? Okay, so I can achieve your benefit, but not actively interpret like some kind of traditional values, but for example, not actively engage in like dangerous discourse or like actively attacking that kind of people. But even if this is your benefit, compare that to my benefit. To losing funding, to make people angry, to break the community, to protest before the church, to talk to the people, look, you lost my trust. You appeal to the other group of people. Look for these people, they are different. These people didn't vote for you. These people didn't spend the last 10 years for you. And you can see this sway in Catholic Church now when you have like a Pope Francis and how many people have like a problems and how many people disengage in this.
panel, we gave you extremely important and big group of people already. We told you that if you try to change this and if you try to reinterpret it, you lose the core of your religion, the core of your believers, the people who gave you credibility, the people who gave you being the leader of this organization, the people who gave you this power in the state and everything. And you risk that for potential benefits which are not tangible and are less probable than potential losing of these believers. Proud to oppose.
Okay, I'd like to thank Deputy Director and everyone in the top half for an excellent debate thus far. I'd now like to welcome the member.
Okay, I have two problems with O's case, okay? The first one is basically that it's assuming that every single person who belongs to a religion absolutely follows every single dogma in the religion. This is everyone in the religion, like in, I don't know, Judaism, doesn't do absolutely anything in Shabbat, okay? And they all like work and their whole life is about studying the Torah. This is absolutely not true. In Christianism, the opposite, which is like the most religious and like old-time kind of people, they are the ones that absolutely follow Christianism in everything they do. Most people simply like go to church, but probably use condoms, right? That is the vast majority of people in every single religion. Thus, their case only operates for a very, very small part of the religion, which we'll also talk about later, okay? But the second one is, I don't think they understand what the essence of religion is. Okay, the essence of religion is there's a God and there's a prophet that has come to earth, or not yet has come, in order to like give us a valuable message which we are to transmit to the rest of the world. That is what religions are about. That is the essence of religion. How are religions going to be better off when this is best done? We are going to prove how it is this way that we're going to transmit the values better both amongst our own religion, the already religious people, but also amongst the non-religious. Even if they never get to enter the church, still we're transmitting our values, and that is what our religion is about. Okay, so let's start first. Why is it going to be better within the religion? Okay, I believe in general the religions who adapt the least have the most divisions, okay? We saw this with Christianism in its beginnings, how it didn't adapt, and thus new churches started to appear in Christianism. We see this in Muslims today. They say it's the most coherent and the most like close and best religion in the world. I don't think that's true. I think it's the most divided religion in the world. I think Muslims kill themselves. I think this is awful for a religion. I don't think a religion wants their people to be so divided. I think this is always going to be worse off for the religion because you're not saving the values of the religion, which are, after all, protect everyone, but especially protect those who believe the same thing as you. Okay, so the thing about this is, I think in general, the general values of religions do not divide. This is because they are not time-bound, right? The fact that you have to like help the others, or the fact that you have to believe in Allah is not time-bound, and thus they generally do not divide the population. What does divide are these concretions. Why? Because they're not simply beliefs, they are ways of living, and they're ways of living which were created at a time, at a specific time, and were adapted to that specific time, right? Then this means the moment people start to change, the moment society begins to change, then those specific things do not apply to everyone else, okay? And religions, I mean, they have changed. We see how the Vatican Concilium suddenly started saying all humans must be dignified, thus we have to abolish all privileges for the clergy, okay? I mean, they do change, and this is what does not divide. The problem is when some people start not feeling identified with these concretions of religion, and some people do, that is when you create the divisions within a religion. Not yet. Okay, so I think maybe there's like a very small group who do adhere completely to them, okay? I think they're not that relevant in this debate. Why is this? Because generally, they are always going to interpret the religion in a different way. What does this mean? Because religion is their way of living, because religion is so interpretable, whatever the religion in itself says, they're always going to be adapting it, they're always going to be interpreting it, and they are going to interpret it in different ways. Most of them will interpret it in different ways and in more radical ways that the Pope does do it, or that, I don't know, sorry, I don't know the leaders of different religions, but you get what I mean, right? So, the thing is, they are always going to be unsatisfied. They are always going to feel that the rest of the religion is not like them, right? The problem is the majority does not feel completely identified with religion. I think complete identification is the very essence of religion, because religion is meant to be who you are, not what you do, right? So, what is the impact of this? First of all, the majority of the religion is not attached. I think in Israel, for example, every year there are more people who consider themselves secular. Why is this? Because they do not feel completely attached to what they are doing. But also, and this is most important, it creates good Muslims and bad Muslims, good Christians and bad Christians, people to adhere to the old values and people who don't. I think this is what makes divisions, and they make people inside the religion feel oppressed by their own religion. I think this is completely contrary to the values of the religion and consequently creates divisions within the religion and is consequently not good for a religion in itself. But secondly, also outside the religion, but first,
You say that there are some adaptations that should be done by the time. But what you're talking about is like teaching all your values. If you don't know the values about using condoms, that's okay. But there are some values that inherent to the church and stuff like that. You cannot lose the values.
I think I've already proven how these inherent values are not such, okay? I think there are some inherent values, but there are some things which are simply ways of living, not actual values, which do change. For example, I've given the example of the Vatican, how they changed the concept of human and dignification, and they didn't lose the values of Christianity. They didn't stop saying what Christ said they had to do, right? That is the essence of religion. But also outside the religion, I think one of the most important things for religion is transmitting your values, not only having a community, but actually telling people what you believe is good for them, because God said it's good for them, right? I think it's so much more difficult to transmit your values doing these kind of things. Why? Because, why? Because when you see abortion, when you see halal, or you see circumcision, these are big differences to what you do. They might not be bad or good, I don't care, but they're very different to what you do. What does this mean? This means you stigmatize the people who do it. The moment you stigmatize someone, then you see the religion as a whole different to you, as a whole incomprehensible, and you don't even try to understand what they do. You don't even try to understand the values underlying those traditions. You're not willing to listen to anything to say. You don't listen to the values. You don't listen to the path of life in Buddhism, or the importance of family in Judaism, or the fact of redemption. These are the values that you have to transmit, because it is what you want to do as a religion. Okay, so what does this mean? I think that there are many people in the world that actually do consider themselves religious, but do not adhere themselves to a certain institution. I think there are many people who would adhere to your institution, but even if they don't, even if it's not true, at least you are transmitting your values, which is precisely what religions are created for, because that's what you want to do, because that's what your prophet told you to do, because that's what God told you to do. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'd like to thank Member Goodman for that speech, and I'd like to welcome Member Off.
Okay. So, many 2 points in my case. The first one is what is actually going to happen when people will be mad because the extreme people will be mad because their religion is not representing them. We think that OO said that people will be mad, then came CG and told them, well, there will always be people that interpret the religion, otherwise, why is this so matter? We have to explain exactly this point. Second, we think that governments clearly trying to really shallow the meaning of what is a religion. We are going to explain you how religion will just change gradually, and to the point that what is what is it to be religious if not to use your conservative values? At the point where it will not be longer a religion. Before that, a little bit of rebuttal, because I must say that what they're telling us that religion is about people believing in reward. We think that two things. One, why is this matter? In the best case, people will behave nicely. This is not the interest of religion. Religion, for example, if someone eats pork, this is clearly against the Jewish religion. Okay, this is not helping them. But even if they are going to people will believe in reward, it doesn't help us if they don't believe that the rules are correct, and once the rules are changing all the time, they cannot believe anymore that what they are doing is right. Okay, let's start with the first point. Why? What happens with people? Because with people that believe in the more extreme part of the religion. We think that OG tells us people do not change their opinion overnight. This is their words. We think that this is very true. People that think that abortion is a murder, LGBT sex is a crime against humanity, and are not going to change their mind, and there are a lot of them. We have an entire state, Alabama, that passed a law against abortion in the United States. So there are a lot of them. What happens when those people are no longer represented by their religious leader? We think that they are just going to search and create and empower another leaders. We think that another leaders will come because there is a demand for someone to give this community a voice. We think that those leaders will be more extreme, and because the extreme people think that the main religion doesn't represent them, they will try to be more extreme in order to be elected and to present. No. Okay? We think that when we have now another current in the religion, another flow, another part that is more extreme, this have all the bad implication because of what they do. Because what people see is the extremist action. They see the protest against the parade walking. They see they see the shooter in the television. This is the shooter in the television that comes and shoot all the gay people in a gay club or something like this. We think that when we have when the overall society sees this and identifies this with the religion, because that's what they are exposed to in the media, this gives a much less political capital for religious rules, much less political capital for celebs to come out as religious. We think that it makes more tensions inside the religion, and they need to invest energy in order to convince each other in opposite to just convince someone who is not religious right now. We think that all of these things are the impact of what is going to happen when you have another current in the religion, and this is why we don't want to do that, not just because people will be mad. Okay, before I go on, first please.
Okay, so it's so shallow to assert the most fundamental part of religiosity is about hating gay people. I think what is the most important are the values inherent to every religion. In Christianity, that looks like love thy neighbor. That's why you hear that in every mass, not rants about abortion.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings me to my second point. What is the power of religion? What is going to happen when the religious leaders are going to give this concession that, you know what, gay sex is okay? We think that first, religious just massively loses its power to be perceived as the right thing, because the right thing was written for those people. Sorry, not myself. That was written before 5,000 years or 200 years in a book. Until now, this book said, "Do not do gay sex." Right now, comes someone and says, "You know what? This book, there's no other way you can put it. It's just wrong." And we think that when people cannot believe that what they're doing is God's words, and just they think, okay, this is our leader's words, we think that this is just very, very bad. I don't have a word for very bad, but something bad. Okay. And this is just terrible for religion, because now one of the major forces that keeps people in a religion is the fact that they think that it's God will. Okay, this is replying exactly to their point about people. But moreover, we think that this is not going to stop here, because the values that right now religious person are going to consent are values that are in the major society are already 20 years ago were consented. Like LGBT is quite common right now. We think that secular organizations will perceive this as a win. They will see, we get a concession, and they will celebrate on this. They will post it on Facebook, yeah, we got what we wanted. A feminist organization about abortion will say we got what we want. They will, because they want to grow and to convince more secular people to believe them. We think that right now there will be much more likelihood that secular organization will demand concessions for transgenders, free sex, driving on Shabbos if you're a Jew. Okay, this is the values that that the religion should fight for today. And right now you just move the line to the balance, the status quo, to be another status quo, and you give this consent. And so, what is the religious about? If you can have free sex, if you can sleep with a gay person from your own sex, if you can eat pork, if you can do all this, then what are we left with? This is not a religion. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'd like to thank the member of all. Good job, Wes.
A couple of things in this debate. First, we're going to resolve the clash that has happened on the high chambers. And basically, what they talk about is, listen, we care about a large group of society, and we want society to accept religion. Like, and they're referring to like maybe secularized population, right? And maybe like non-believers, and they care about that, and that's fine, right? On their side of the house, they care about the more attached and engaged groups, which represent, like, let's say, on the best case, like a 5 to 10% of that religious group that my partner has already explained, and I will get to that characterization later and provide mechanisms why that percentage is the case. And at the end of the day, they said, we care about this people, we care about these other people, and we are going to bring to you what actually matters to dominant religious groups and why we care more about the people that we bring to you in this debate. Right, so first, what are the incentives for religion? Well, basically, we think that religion provides a transcendental meaning, not right now, to your life. Like, it gives you meaning, it gives you a sense of purpose, it gives you an afterlife thought, it gives you a sense that you were created by someone, that you have a purpose in this life, and ultimately, and like what they bring on CO is basically that people keep believing in religion because it's God's will, but that is not the case. People believe in religion because it provides them with support when they are in their life's hardest moments, right? And this only works when God's will is interpreted by their leaders, and the leaders take care of the population through masses or confession or other mechanisms in different religions, right? And so basically, what OO is saying here is, so what we say here is, dominant religions want a large user base, right? Rather than a smaller group of people that are more engaged. And this is the direct clash with us and OO. And basically, what are the user bases of each religion? Let's take Christianism, for example. We have, let's say, the Jesuits, we have the Opus Dei, we have the Amish, like we have, I mean, like within Christians, like there's the Orthodox Church, like, but overall we can say that like even like religious orders like monks and stuff, like, the majority, like if we take a normal distribution, the outliers would be like the Amish or like the Mormons, right? Like those are not so large. Like yes, they live in like very large livestock and fields in Pennsylvania, but like they're not all over the world, right? Like the rest are Christians. Like for example in Spain, like the majority like adhere to Marist or like Jesuit interpretations of the Bible and such. Secondly, let's say, for example, let's take Islam. Within Islam, there's like a very large divide, yes, that is actually making them murder each other in Yemen. But let's say they have the Sunnis and the Shias, right? And like once again, like the majorities vary, but like overall, what we say is that, and in Judaism, it happens the same, right? The Orthodox section that ultimately, abides by all the rules and dietary restrictions and pilgrimage and such is a lesser percentage than the overall religion, right? But let's now talk about the 5 and 10% that they talked about, right? They are the communities that believe that are like mostly irrational, like they have hardcore beliefs in the regard of religion. They don't really think highly of the rest of the religious groups of the people within their religion or the leadership. They are betrayed by leadership most times because they think that they're not supporting them enough in terms of like their conservative beliefs, right? And so their time expenditure is definitely invested in religion 100%. And the media really is attracted to that and really portrays that. And most of the time, they're used politically to create affiliation to political parties and such. So what? And they portray a certain image of religion that is necessarily a little radical and not necessarily controlled by the actual dominant religion. And that is a harm and it is not within the interest of the dominant religion, because in the end, one, as my partner explained, it creates a divide, and second, in rebuttal to OO, at the end of the day, they don't have the control of that image. On the second, and also they damage and stigmatize the rest of the segments, and that, as my partner explained. But what are the incentives, once again, of the dominant religions? Well, they want constant, and what happens on our side of the house if we protect this core big group instead of the radicals, and why do we think they are more aligned with the dominant incentives? We're basically, on our side of the house, the dominant religion has more money, ultimately, because people are more concentrated, even if they don't contribute as much per person, right? But second, there's more likelihood of continuity, because in the end, more people are aligned with societal values, right? Because there's more people, right, that will, let's say, okay, they don't have as many children per person, but yes, there's more people, so in the end, there's more children, so continuity. And they're more aligned with societal values, so they're much more likely to keep exerting those beliefs because they actually believe they're sort of right. And second, it's much more likely to be expanded because, once again, we're talking about the core group as in the 60-75% of the religion. And before I continue, I'll take upper.
Even if our group is smaller, it's much more vocal and powerful. You couldn't ignore our analysis, how people will feel betrayed.
Okay, enough.
Dangerous.
So basically, they're saying they're more vocal. I'm saying that's right. They're more portrayed by media. What I'm saying is that's harmful to the religion because it portrays a radical image and creates tension and divide within the dominant religion. And so we think there's much more harms on their side of the house than on ours. So okay, and so basically, now that we've resolved the upper clash, now let's see what we've brought on this debate and how we compare with the upper half. Well, they explain to you how it's people are more likely to be engaged and people are more likely to pay taxes and go to schools. What we say is that community within dominant religions is much more important, like the community that they have. Why? Because it's their current user base. It's the ones who are going to ensure continuity in the future. It's the one who portray the religion in the present and are ultimately the ones who can actually expand them. Second, we explain the But because they're not attaining the ultimate purpose of religion, which my partner explained, which is spreading the word of God. And for all those reasons, very proud to propose.
Okay, I'd like to go with the speech open.
No, this debate is about the interests of those religions. We believe they have two interests: sustaining a sustainable amount of people, of believers, and the second, keeping the religion going as a religion. I will start with the first one. Where do we have more people within the religion keeping our values? Okay, so we get this first from OG. We say if we widespread our beliefs and we address like a wider audience, we will have more people. That sounds like a concession, I guess. I mean, if you have something you believe in and you don't no longer believe in it, of course you're going to address a larger audience. But what we don't get from them is why are these people going to transfer to our religion, right? Because it seems that, right, they tell us, oh, they want to have community, to have some meaning. It seems to us, I don't understand why they don't have some community and meaning right now. I mean, we have a free market. If these people want their type of religion, I don't understand why they don't have it right now. We can see there are some secular religions. You don't have to be like the most adherent to your religion in order to have community and a sense of meaning, not now. And then we get this case from CG. We want, of course, we are talking about moving people from within the religion, right? We don't believe we can transform like Jewish to become Muslim and Christian to become Jewish and stuff like that. This is like a small percent of people. We mostly care about moving secular people to the most religious part. So they say, okay, right now there are good values in the religion, right? You have to give money to poor people, you have to take care of the widow and stuff like that. So we want people having and practicing those good values, but they seem to miss the main thing about religion. You cannot have some, right? Those values are so intertwined. When they probably don't understand the prohibition of using condoms and contraception measures. I will explain to you briefly. You are not allowed to use condoms and stuff like that in order for you to not have sex with people you are not committed to, right? You have to have like free sex with the person you want that person to be pregnant. So that's keeping you from having like random sex with people and making women pregnant and not taking care of the child. That's like the most inherent value of Judaism, not having like bastards all around, because like men are able to do that. So that's like an inherent value which they don't understand and they want to live out. But these values are so intertwined, and you cannot have some and not the others. Because from a young age, with being a religious person, you have to practice some stuff, right? You have to wash your hands before you eat a meal, and you have to pray 3 times a day. So you keep those values in mind. Even if not necessarily all the practices you do are good, you have to do those in order to be able to do the good values and good stuff. If you just say to people, okay, you don't have to do anything, just be good. That seems to us like, okay, something we could do, but you have to teach these people how to do it. And by practicing their religion all day, that's how they can keep those values in mind. They also tell us about how people are becoming more secular because people believe in same sex. Yes. Those people we cannot pull back into religion. Those people of faith is already cracked. This might be just the symptom. So we want to put a plaster on the symptoms, but their faith is already cracked. We cannot bring them back into being religious. And also about how we will move seculars. They just don't explain to us the main burden about how I, as being a secular person, why would I now move to be a more religious person, right? Even if this shares more of my values and more of my beliefs, being secular actually has more of my values than anything that they could ever have, and I live a happy life being secular. There is no reason for me to move to their side. Okay, but this clash is not important because it's obvious that if we address the large audience, we will have more people, and if we have no values, we will have more people. And if we are just like for water parks and sunshines, everybody will believe in that, and that's fine. But we don't care about that because that's not practicing our religion. No, I will take it in a second. Okay, and the second is how religion is going to keep itself. So OG, in their little speech, they say we care about religion in the long term. That's like their metric. We care about how this religion is going to keep itself in the long term. They want society to have like a better image of this religion. But what Navot tells you is once you have and you bring in those progressive values, the conservative people explain to us about how they are still going to be conservative from opening opposition because they were born and raised on those values, that they've been practicing this their whole life. So these people are now going to feel personally attacked. In Israel, when you have a pride parade in Jerusalem, you get, these people feel personally attacked. You come to their house and tell them how to behave. And that's how you get backlash from society. And that's not just a theoretical thing. We can actually see that happening in Israel. The more you try to force liberal values on those people, the more you're going to have backlash. And opening opposition didn't really give us an impact. Navot did. He told you about how they're going to be more violent. Yes, opening.
Okay, so the claim underpinning this case and openings, people want a literalist interpretation of texts. Obviously untrue in the Bible, slavery is permitted, people are forbidden to wear mixed fabrics. As we told you, they still follow these religions because of leaders' reinterpretations of these texts.
There are some adaptations, right? We already POI that about how having some adaptations. But coming to our second point about how these kind of adaptations is not something we want to have on our religion. Navot already explains to you, these values are old news, right? People have been having same-sex marriage and same-sex marriage being legal for more than 20 years, right? Now the values happening is that the values of the progress left is people being able to transform their gender, right? So even if we now accept these progressive values, in 20 years, we will need to have more change, right? We don't have slaves because that's a normal adaptation about how life is. And also, we didn't have slaves in the Torah. Just lie, okay. So as much as we're going to adapt to this is not going to stop. We can see the progressive left moving more and more to the left and accepting more and more values. Even if we kiss them right now, that doesn't mean they will have our laws, as OG says to us, because these people have already progressed much more. So this is like an endless battle in order to just keep up with progressive values. The moment we accept some more values, we're going to lose our core believers. So please oppose. Thank you.